Welcome, good thinkers, trying to be punctual, straight up 9 o'clock. There's always a lag in the live stream, but welcome to Good Thinking Live. Curious if you're joining us either from LinkedIn Live, yay, LinkedIn, or YouTube Live, yay, YouTube. Welcome, good thinkers. I'm so glad you're here to join me on Monday morning Pacific Coast time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, for just a little bit of time, stealing a little bit of time away from all the time we are told what to think, to explore or give ourselves a little bit more time to improve how we think. That's it. Short, sweet, Monday morning, well, at least here, Monday morning, little brain boost. So welcome here. Let me know who you are and where you're from. I'll put this in. Let me know who you are and where you're from in the chat. The LinkedIn people can see a lot of the LinkedIn chat, and the YouTube good thinkers rather can see all the people in the YouTube chat, but you can't see each other. So today I'm curious to explore the idea of how we form opinions and to create a conversation around the difference between a strong opinion and a smart opinion. Now, a smart opinion doesn't mean I agree with you. A smart opinion is more about how you form the opinion. A strong opinion is more about the strength with which you hold that opinion. All right, so when you think about an opinion that you hold really strongly, we're not going to talk about whether it's a smart opinion because we're going to get there, but when you think about an opinion you hold really strongly in your hand, what opinion comes to mind? You can either share it in the chat or not, but just have that in your mind as we go through the conversation. And now I'm going to say hi to a few early bird good thinkers who are here. We've got Susame from India. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. We've got Stephen from the 45th parallel. We've got Lionel from Mexico. I am so happy. The best thing about Good Thinking, the Good Thinking Show, and doing the show every morning live, even when I was up late last night, is all of you good thinkers from around the world and getting this perspective of people that have different perspectives because not just of their experience in the United States where I am, but from everywhere around the world. It's so incredibly valuable. Jeff Ginsburg, zink. Okay, Michael from cold Toronto. You know, it's actually kind of beautiful here in Portland. Duncan from the UK. So look at this. We've got people from all over. Keep coming, keep letting us know who you are and where you're from. Okay, I'm going to tell a story. This is one of my favorite stories for me to kind of check when I have an opinion or a strongly held opinion. So the story goes like this. Oh, first I have to say hi to Jennifer from Pinot Country, Pinot Noir, the grapes of delicious wine. All right, so here is the story. Max Planck, who was the theoretical physicist, Nobel Prize winning physicist, who ultimately was the originator of the concept of quantum theory. So he was a pretty smart guy. When he was traveling around Germany to talk about his physics, all of his physics stuff, he had the same chauffeur, and he would be chauffeured around all over. And the chauffeur, when he would stop at a venue, the chauffeur would come in his hat and sit in the audience and listen over and over and over again to Professor Planck's talk, the same kind of talk on whatever theoretical physics or quantum theory. And after many, 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 many times traveling around and hearing the speech, one day the chauffeur says, "Hey, Max, I have an idea. You willing to consider it?" Max Planck's like, "Sure, I'm open." He says, "How about the next venue with all of these German physicists? I deliver the speech and you wear the chauffeur's hat and sit in the audience." It's like, all right, let's give it a shot. So the chauffeur stands up in front of this group of esteemed physicists and proceeds to give Max Planck's presentation. And at the end of the presentation, a very wise physicist stands up and asks just this crushingly detailed, difficult question, which the chauffeur, has no idea. And, he knows how to deliver the speech, but he doesn't know how to answer the question. So this is what he says. He says, I'm very surprised at, given that this is Berlin at the height of intelligentsia, I'm very surprised that someone would ask such a basic question. It's so basic. And he points to Max Planck in the front row with his chauffeur's hat on. And he says, it's so basic that even my chauffeur can answer that question. And he allows the chauffeur, Max Planck, disguised as a chauffeur, to answer that question. All right. So what does this have to do with forming opinions? Anyone know? I always think, who knows if these stories, these kind of famous stories, how much are true and how much we make to fit the narrative. But I don't care in this particular case, because what I like to think about is my opinion on something formed by Max Planck kind of understanding or the chauffeur's kind of understanding? Like, I've heard people parroting this opinion so much, these people seem like me, therefore that's my opinion too. So when you think, here's the next question. When you think of one of your strongly held opinions, is it more like a Max Planck opinion or is it more like a chauffeur opinion? Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. Let me know. Come on. Be honest. Be honest. I can definitely challenge some of my strongly held opinions and realize maybe they're more chauffeur-like than Max Planck-like. All right. Daksha from Sri Lanka. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Welcome, good thinker. So anyway, let us know in the chat. Be honest. When you thought of the opinion that you were going to kind of take through good thinking today, is it more like a Max Planck or a chauffeur opinion? And how do you know? Here's my next question while you answer that. How do you know, of all the topics that we have right now, all the topics that are out there, how do you decide which topics to hold a strong opinion about? Like, is it something that mostly interests you and so you decide, or is it your friends? I mean, there's a lot of topics that are out there that you may not know anything about, let alone hold a strong opinion. And then you may read an article and all of a sudden, wow, that's a really strong opinion. How do you decide? So Dr. Gopal, hi, welcome. Let us know where you're from. It's always fun to see where everyone's from. So Michael, situational. Does it require system 2 thinking or is it an instant opinion? Really good. Hey, I'm forgetting to bring all of you guys into the chat. I'm so sorry. I love Michael's point. I think that if an opinion is strongly held, it probably should be held by a little more deliberation than just system 1 thinking. I mean, system 1 thinking is maybe like the light turns green, you go. A strongly held opinion should probably have more beef behind it. I'm going to put some people in the chat so they can see where everyone's from. Okay, we've lost some. We're going to go like this and that and this and that and this and sync. Anyway, let me know in the chat how you decide. Maybe it's just because of the stuff you're interested in, and then you just take the things you're interested in. And here's the other thing. There is a difference between having an opinion on something that is good or bad and having an opinion on the best way to address this. And it doesn't mean that people who think that the way you think is the best way to address it is wrong. If I think that your way to address something is wrong, that doesn't mean that I think the thing is right. So for example, imagine, I use a lot of medical examples because these are high stakes decision examples, but imagine that someone you love is diagnosed with cancer and you want that person to be cured and well. Maybe what you really want is them to be cured right away. And maybe someone else says, you know what, I would be willing to take a little longer if they were cured for many, many more years. So we might decide exactly how we look at that, but we both know we want that cancer gone. We want that person healthy. Now, we both agree on the end result, more or less, and you decide that you want to take this path, or you think that they should take this path. And let's say that I decide that they should take this path. And then you say to me, well, if you decide, if you don't agree with my path, then you must think that the cancer is good. That's a really bad opinion. That's an example of when you are deciding that the evidence that supports the opinion is just evidence that you like. So that's an example of what I'm taking. You could take a lot of things. You could say, okay, we want to eliminate as much as racism is bad. And this is how I think we're going to address this. You have to do this. And I might think, oh, I don't agree with that. I think you should go like this. And you say, well, if you don't go like this, then you like racism or you don't care. That's one of the things. The other thing is, like, should you be speaking about your opinions before you've really done the work? Should you be speaking about your opinions before you've done the work? So first of all, how do you decide what to have an opinion on? Like, when you think of your strongly held opinion, when did you form that opinion? Do you remember the day? If you just read an article that you think is very persuasive, is that a good reason to form an opinion? A persuasive article, is that a good enough reason? Yes or no? A persuasive article, yes, a good reason, or no, a good reason? I've got to get the rubber chickens out. Got to get the rubber chickens to form an opinion. Is it a good enough reason? Because persuasion is a persuasive argument is not the same as a good argument. Jennifer says, do the work first. Do the work before forming a strong opinion. Okay, so that's a great, thank you for setting that one up. I love it, because that leads us right into, how do you know if you know enough to have a strong opinion? Like, if someone you think is really, really smart, they agree with you philosophically, politically, religiously, all the things that you really hold as part of your core self, whatever that means. And they have an opinion. Is that good enough for you to have that same opinion? Or is that too chauffeur-like? All right. So Alan says, no, do your own research. Okay. Michael says, no, always put your brain in gear before your mouth. Yeah. And it's easy for me to say, but sometimes I make that mistake. Don't tell anyone, Michael, but sometimes. And then I'm like, but 100% agree. Everyone's saying, essentially, do the work, use your brain, do your research. All right. So what's the research? Well, that's what we're going to get into today. And I'm going to go through some obvious things, and then we're going to get into some kind of not quite obvious things. And then we're going to ask the quintessential question. Do you have to have an opinion on everything that's important? Okay, Navsheen says, hear both sides. Brilliant, absolutely. Hear both sides. What about studying both sides? What's the difference between hearing both sides and studying both sides? Love it. Love the comments. All right, let's go through the obvious things. You can read to, let's say you're tempted to form an opinion. You see, okay, let's take this one. I was having a great conversation with my sister on this one, so this was great. You watched, I don't know how many of you watched the Oprah Winfrey interview with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And it was shocking how many people had strong opinions. You go to Twitter for strong opinions. Not necessarily for smart opinions, but so many people had strong opinions. Or the Woody Allen situation, where so many people have strong opinions on things that they really don't have access to all the information. So why do we have to have strong opinions? I mean, especially like in this country where we don't even have a monarchy in the US, why do people have to have strong opinions on Oprah Winfrey's interview? Like, can't we just say, oh, we watched it. I thought it was interesting. Because you might want to be up on what people are talking about if your friends are talking about the interview. But do you have to have a strong opinion? All right. So Stephen says, unless I'm trying to sell you something, then just say, yes, my husband is very wise. That's why we've been married for as long as we have, a long time. And he says, and I think this is great, especially if it comes to me, unless he's trying to sell me something, he just says yes. You're so busted. So busted, Stephen. All right. So you can read, you can talk to competent people and understand their arguments. That's great. as long as the competent people are not exclusively the people that share your point of view. You can listen and chase down arguments that run counter to yours. That's good. I mean, someone who said the good thinkers who said, listen, yes, that's good. What about chasing down those opinions versus letting them just fly into your awareness? Like you actively go and search for opinions that are not. Who has time for that? Well, if you don't have time for that, this is going to be a blatant statement. If you don't have time for that, you don't have time to form a smart opinion. And you should probably let go a little bit of the strength of your opinion. All right, we've got Ali from Pakistan. Welcome, Ali. Fantastic. I'm so glad you're here. Michael says, okay, let's see what Michael says. Always something so smart. You get to choose what is important to you and whether you should have an opinion at all on the topic. Okay, how do you choose? Do you get to choose? Or is it a function of your genes and exposure? Like when you think of how you chose to have an opinion or how you choose to have the thoughts that you have, I have a question for you. If you can choose your thoughts, you can choose not to have any thoughts. So after we depart today from good thinking, try not to have a thought. The thoughts pop into our brain. Where do they come from? Well, I don't know. So where do your opinions come from? Do you have as much control over your opinions as you think you do? I don't know. See, I don't have a strong opinion. Well, I kind of do. I have a kind of maybe too strong of an opinion about where opinions come from, which is we don't necessarily choose as much as we think we choose. But I need more evidence, so I'm not going to hold that opinion too strong, with too much strength. Okay, let me get rid of this little thing on the bottom so we can see your comments in all of their glory. All right. The other thing you can do is think about how you might be fooling yourself. It's very easy to think about how others are fooling themselves. But do you have a method for thinking about how you might be fooling yourself? Do you have something where you can reliably check yourself for being a fool? To check to see if your opinions are held by chauffeur-like knowledge or Max Planck-like knowledge. All right. And then to have the intellectual honesty to kill some of your best loved ideas. All right. So Alan says, let's see. I think it's more important to determine how an opinion is formed, especially mine. I question myself more than anyone. Okay, that is awesome. I should have been giving a couple of rubber chickens, but I cannot. You can't really see this because I have a green screen today because of too much setup for all the work in the background. So I had to do a green screen so it wasn't so messy with cameras and stuff. Anyway, great point. Rubber chickens, Alan. All right. So Maimonides said, my famous Rabbi Maimonides said something very wise, and different people have had different takes on this, but he said, teach thy tongue to say, I do not know, and thou shalt progress. When was the last time you were in a group of people who had strong opinions about something? And you want to be smart. You don't want to be acting like you don't know what they know, but perhaps you know what they know, and perhaps you even know more than they know. And you were confident enough to say, I do not know. Now, they probably dismissed you as how could you not know? Didn't you read that article in the New York Times? Yeah, I actually did. And you still don't know? Or didn't you watch that interview? Or didn't you read that book and you still don't know? When was the last time you were in a group like that? Can you think about it? Is that something that comes to mind? Actually, does that come to mind? Yes or no? It comes to mind or not? I'm very curious. All right. And then Michael says, when you don't have a strong enough opinion, you get the thought and you can release the thought. When you are engaged with the topic, you will do the background work. Yeah, absolutely. And this gets into the work. So let's dive deep into the work, because doing the work counteracts our natural desire to seek only information that confirms what we believe and dismiss evidence and information that does not. Raise your hand if you know what bias that is. Actually, put it in the chat if you know the bias, because there's another bias too. I'll give you two, and you can label them both. Ready? Number one is the bias that makes us seek information that confirms the opinions we're kind of leaning toward, or the opinions we strongly have, and discount evidence that disconfirms. Who can say what that bias is in the chat? Extra bonus points. So that's bias number one. That's the bias. Bias number two is the bias that makes us agree with things that make us feel good. So I always use this example on this bias. I love Teslas, therefore I'm going to invest in Teslas. Okay, James. James gets it. Confirmation bias is the first bias. Rubber chickens, confirmation bias. That is the most common bias. And here's the deal with biases. You can talk about them until you're blue in the face, but you have to really check yourself because it is easier to see biases in other people than in ourselves. The second bias, who can say the second bias? The bias where feelings of like and dislike mean that we are more willing to accept the information. So I like Teslas, therefore I should invest in Teslas, versus I like driving a Tesla, but the financial picture for Tesla and all the financial variables are separate from whether I like Tesla or not. Who knows what that bias is? Put it in the chat for extra bonus points. All right, let's talk about how we do the work. You hear a lot about adopting the mindset of a student. And sometimes you hear these mindset things and you're like, yeah, mindset this and mindset that, the growth mindset, the curiosity mindset, the critical thinking mindset, all these mindsets, all right? So what does it mean to adopt the mindset of a student? Think about that for a minute. Let me see if we got any. Stephen says, confirmation bias is number one. Yes, not understanding the stock market bias. Okay. The stock market bias, that is true. But the official name for this particular, because there's a lot of stock market biases, actually a lot, like the availability, where you see Teslas going up. And so you're like, oh my gosh. Compounding. James says compounding. That's a good guess. And actually, both of these are good guesses because these biases, they're not like crystal clear, like this means this and this means this. But it is good to understand the affect heuristic. It's kind of a heuristic, a rule of thumb bias, which means that feelings of like and dislike, the affect, influences how you perceive the information versus the reliability and relevance of that information. So I like, this kind of ice cream. Therefore, it's the best ice cream to serve at this office party, for example. That is kind of versus really kind of doing the work to figure out if that, or I like the New York Times, therefore that's going to be my best source for forming my opinion. Or I like this. I really like this author. Or this author looks the part. I really like the way this author looks. So I'm going to use that to guide whether I should consider that information. Or I don't like that person. Therefore, what they tell, the evidence that they provide is bad evidence. Well, you might not like the person, but maybe they have some really good, reliable evidence. So that's just separating out the feelings toward that person who's providing, or the feeling toward that source, your feelings, from the actual source material itself. Studying the topic like a student is like getting ready to take an exam versus getting ready to go into a debate. So when you're going into a debate, that is not studying the topic like a student, unless you're competing in debate and you don't know what side you're going to get, and you have to be ready for both sides. That's a different story. But you already know your side. You already have this strong opinion. You already have this super, super strong opinion. And now you're just going to bolster it to get ready to persuade someone. That is not being a student. Now you might think, I'm doing the research, so isn't that like being a student? No. Being a student is getting ready for an exam where you don't know what questions could be on the exam. Now, maybe you've seen your professor and they've led you to believe that these are the kinds of ways he or she feels. That's different. All right. We've got LinkedIn user says representativeness heuristic. Yeah. And that is definitely part of the affect heuristic for sure. Sometimes it's just a matter of semantics. All right. So Alan says, do you think one's occupation influences their thought process? As a practicing engineer and a practicing investor for 30 years, I'm very numbers oriented. Thus I consume data and I try to be analytically objective. Yeah. That's a really good point. I actually think that every input affects every output. So for example, the biggest determinant of how you think and the opinions you hold is probably where you're born, and you don't control that. Hint, hint, where do your opinions come from? The biggest determinant of your future. Now, that's not to say that you can't make things happen, whatever, but the biggest determinant of your net worth and your income, blah, 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 everything is where you're born. Like data statistically, other things obviously in play. So yes, one's occupation absolutely influences, but the key is to really think, where do our opinions come from? All right. So while you're a participant in a conversation, it looks good to be right. But if you really want to form a strong opinion, because you've decided this is something I should have a strong opinion about, which is another thing, like choosing what to have a strong opinion about is a different thing, because you should be a little bit more thoughtful about that than just letting strong opinions pop into your brain. But to really do this, you cannot go in as a student thinking my goal is to win. You have to go into it thinking my goal is to learn. And to do this, you have to mentally step outside of your emotions and your politics. And you have to be aware of these fallacies that are stand-ins for, there's a lot of play right now with labeling certain things. For example, let's say that I had a cancer treatment that was called the anti-cancer treatment. And this other treatment for cancer that I want to just want to get rid of is called something else. Maybe it's called chemotherapy. So this is just chemotherapy, it just has a label, chemotherapy. And this is called anti-cancer. And if I don't, and you tell me that if I don't choose this anti-cancer, that you must like cancer. So sometimes labels can be stand-ins for really investigating the content beneath the label. And that's important. And that starts with kind of disidentifying from any one position. So if you start with a position and go into your opinion, you're probably not in the student mindset. So you kind of have to kind of disidentify, which is hard in this era of identifying and, identifying with everything. I'm a this, I'm a that. So in order to form that opinion, you really do have to do some disidentification. I know that runs counter to a lot, but it is what it is. And you have to get to the raw substance. You have to get the raw substance of the topic. So for example, why does this topic even matter in the first place? Not why does it matter in the first place, but why? What are the things historically? What are the things now that make this matter? And which issues are driving the topic right now? What are all the issues? And there are a lot of issues. That's why having a strong opinion is a really hard thing if you're going to do it wisely. Which side is arguing what? What side is arguing what? And there's often 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides. We see things as this side or that side. Much more complicated. When you think of a complicated topic that you're considering or you have an opinion on, what is a complicated topic? Put it in the chat. Whoever puts it in the chat, we're going to use your topic. Just put a complicated topic in the chat. Could be something about which you hold a strong opinion, maybe not. All right. Oh, we're almost at 28 minutes, so we got to hurry up and wrap it up. So put the topic. You don't have to say what your opinion is. Just put the topic in the chat. Okay. And then you also, the last step in kind of being a student is you really need to know how, not only what all the sides of what all the arguments are, but you actually have to know how people are responding to all the sides of the argument. That's a different thing. So you have to kind of be disinterested enough, or kind of disidentify rather. Then you have to get to the raw substance of the argument. You have to reasons why it matters, what issues are driving the topic, what each of the sides are arguing, and then how each of the sides are reacting to those arguments. All right? Okay. Question. Do you know anyone that is world class in their field, like a Max Planck was in theoretical physics, who is humble and honest about the depths of their ignorance? Like most of the people that you admire. All right. So let's get into, let's see. Okay. LinkedIn user. Sorry. I think after the live stream, we can see your name. Vulnerability. James says global warming. Fantastic. All right. So let's say you have I have a strong opinion on global warming, which is, that was really unfortunate name to call climate change, because every time it was cold out, people would go, bring on global warming. That was a bad label, in my opinion. All right. So vulnerability, that's a good one too, because that's not something that a lot of people think about as like a controversial, people think, oh, it's so good to be vulnerable. I kind of like that one. It's different. I like climate change or global warming as well. Let's put some other things about which you might feel you have a strong opinion. I just wanted to know if any of you know someone who is really an expert in their field, like really an expert who still says, listen, I'm going to be intellectually courageous and say, I might be wrong about some of my strongly held opinions. All right. So James says, I agree. Let's see. So let me question this. I mean, this is a question, and this is like, we're getting down to the last questions, and then I'm going to go quickly through the last few things because rambling too long. Sorry about that. Here's the question. Is it harder to be a student than to be an expert? Is it harder? And by that, I mean, is it harder to remain a student, even if you think you're butting up against, some of the self-proclaimed experts? Is it harder to be a student than an expert? Which one? Which one is harder? That one I really want you to answer in the chat, because I've been thinking a lot about that. It is hard when you're with people, especially when you are discussing a topic that you might know more about, actually. You've done more work. And meaning you've looked at it from all kinds of angles. Maybe you haven't read as many books supporting one side, but you've really done the work. And everyone's claiming to be an expert. How do you stay a student? All right. Okay, so we have got, Jennifer says, college bias. Absolutely, there's a college bias. And that's part of the authority bias. I went to a prestigious university, or so-and-so went to a prestigious university. And James says, it's harder to be an expert. Ooh, you think it's harder to be an expert? What makes someone an expert? Who decides if you're an expert? I am going to make I have an opinion, not a strong opinion. It's a weak opinion. That's why I wanted everyone else's opinion. But thank you for answering. I have an opinion that it's harder to be a student. I think that it is harder to remain a student because at some point we are evaluated on whether we are definitive. We are consistent. We are not flip-floppers. And that leads us to be a little bit stronger in our opinions that may not be the smartest opinion. So I think there is that pull, and I think it's very difficult to remain a student. Not in the beginning where you say, oh, I'm just learning. But at a certain point where people kind of start turning to you for answers, they don't want you to say, hey, listen, I don't know. They want you to be their Max Planck so that you can be their chauffeur. That's why I think it's harder to be a student. Aha. Michael says, an expert student, never be the smartest one in the room. Yeah, that's not ever hard for me. And Ellen says, I think an expert should be a continual student and be courageous to change one's opinion. Absolutely. So I think what you're saying is that to be an expert is to be a student. Maybe that's a better answer. You guys have just made me change my opinion. And Susume says, expert. So we got a couple people who think it's harder to be an expert and a couple people who say you can't be an expert unless you're a student. So that's a great one. So, the point is you've got to understand the arguments. You've got to know the arguments. You've got to collect arguments. Or it's okay to say, I'm not going to have an opinion about this, or I'm not going to have a strong opinion. You can even have a light opinion. That's okay. You could say, yeah, I kind of have a light opinion, but I haven't done the work to have a strong opinion. And I don't want to have strong opinions that are not smart opinions. That's okay. So the question remains, if you're going to do the work, you're going to analyze, you're going to look at things from both sides, you're going to collect. And that means even when you land on your opinion and you're holding it strongly, if it's going to remain a smart opinion, you've got to loosen up on the grip because we're learning and progressing all the time. So new information might come in. And if you are not letting that information in to be considered in the opinion, then your strong opinion can start losing its the element of being smart. So you've got to be willing to change your mind. So we've got to let people change their minds. That's really it. To be an expert, you must continuously learn. And this is why, you hear this stuff and you think this is so true. And you hear this stuff and you go, yeah. But when you really think about it, when you really, really think about it, we don't have to have strong opinions on everything because we're busy. And so it's totally fine to say, I don't have a strong opinion on that because I haven't done the work. And I only want to have strong opinions that are also smart opinions. That's it. Hope you guys join. You guys, good thinkers. I love you so much. I love you so much. And I love having people from around the world each Monday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, on LinkedIn Live, on YouTube Live, and even the people that are joining later. I love it. The comments, the engagement. We deserve to give our brains a little bit of time to improve how to think. So that's all this show is. Just fun. Thank you for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And hope to see you next week. I have a guest next week who was a smoke jumper, and his decision-making information is going to blow your mind. Love it. He's a great guy. So tune in next week. See ya. Have a great week.